Hello and welcome to the Collecting Heroes podcast. I'm your host JD, the collector of collectors, and this is the podcast where I speak to pop culture collectors from around the world about their collections, about their passions. And today we're going to be venturing into, we should call it the upside down almost, going upside down with the podcast, because my next collector that I have on the show, his name is Diego. He's from Denver. And he is a Stranger Things collector. Diego, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
I reached out to you. I saw your collection. As I mentioned to you earlier, I've actually been following your collection for a while and remember seeing it when I was looking at collectors at least a year ago, I think it was now. But tell people a little bit about your collection. And as you said you've listened to the podcast already. You know, obviously, I love to get the history of how you came to become a fan of something. So tell me, how did you get into Stranger Things and start collecting them?
Well, I was a bit of a latecomer to the series. It had probably been around for at least 6 months before I kind of watched it almost out of self-defense because everybody else was talking about it and I was just clueless. That was like around Christmas of 2016, and I was 5 minutes into it and I was hooked.
Nice.
I ended up watching it 2 or 3 times, and then I started looking around for communities, to talk about it. And along the way, I kind of discovered the collecting aspect. Now I'm a serial collector, and I was looking for something at the time. I've been collecting since I was a kid.
Okay.
But I found out, most of the stuff, the commercially available stuff, it was inexpensive. It was easy to get. So it was kind of a natural fit for me. And for the first year or so, I was pretty sane about it. At the end of that first year, I had a little bookcase full of stuff, Funko Pops, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then early in 2018, there were several events that kind of converged. One was that I was in a car accident, so I was laying around the house for a couple weeks with nothing better to do. And during that time, I discovered eBay. And started discovering that there was a lot more depth to the memorabilia and stuff that was available. So I kind of went crazy, and after that, it just exploded.
Yeah, wow. I mean, discovering eBay, that was definitely going to be a rabbit hole that you could go down of finding extra pieces. I think for many collectors, it's, when you go onto eBay and you do those searches and you see these things that you're like, oh my God, like I haven't seen this in my local store. This is something really cool. I have to have that. And then it's one thing after another, and it just starts stockpiling until eventually you are a collector, right? And you have this massive collection of things. I noticed you've got quite a few things, like you said, pop vinyls, but you've also got, it looks like artworks. You've got cards. You've got figurines, mugs. I've seen bedspread, or like you've got bedding. Quite a few different Stranger Things items, and it's funny because it's such a new fandom, and as you mentioned, like 2016, like it hasn't been around for a long time. But
and that's kind of the surprising thing, because the depth of the material that's available is huge. It's amazing how much stuff is out there.
Yeah, and actually, let's go into a little bit about your collection. As I mentioned, all the different things. I'm going to go straight for it. But one of the things that I sometimes ask people is, what is the weirdest or the oddest thing that you have in your collection? And I'm going to say, because based on a recent post that you put on Instagram, I'm going to say there's maybe a screen used item that is a new to the collection. I think you know what I'm talking about.
I do, and that was what I was going to bring up. I have a friend that is kind of indirectly connected to the show, and she's become a master dumpster diver. And she went in after they started tearing down the sets for season 3, collecting stuff that they were removing and just discarding. And it was from the scenes where the boys are in the mall and they come up on a lingerie store. And there were a couple of items in there that she found, and I ended up getting them from her. There's a picture that was actually hanging on the wall. And then what you're referencing is a pair of screen used underwear.
And for people listening, Diego has given the quotations when he says screen use, because
Screen
definitely
used in that it appeared on the screen. It was not
not,
screen worn.
not worn. That's right. Worn by a mannequin. I think.
Worn by, yeah, it was kind of a half of a mannequin.
I mean,
I have a,
that's a cool item though. Like having something like that that's like from within a scene, like even something as obscure as that, having a little tiny piece of the show is
yeah.
cool. And I noticed that you collect a lot of different props and things as well.
I'm kind of all over the map. I mean, I find a new rabbit hole that I haven't explored yet, and I go down it. And I have a fair number of pretty conspicuous screen used props,
Mhm.
and then I have a cabinet full of stuff I call my screen accurate props, meaning it's the same make and model of item that was used in the show.
Which,
You know,
being that the show's based in the 80s, might be a bit harder to get some of those items, is it?
some of it is, and when the shows are released, I try to go through them as quickly as possible and identify things,
Yeah.
because once these are identified, the prices just go off.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I just saw a Walkman and set of headphones like Max uses in season 4. A couple months ago, they were selling for $100. One a set of both the Walkman and the headphones, along with the cassette she played, went for almost $11,000.
Whoa. Jeez, that's huge.
It's ridiculous. Somebody is going to regret their purchase there, but that's the kind of thing you have to deal with. So I have to be fast if I want to find something before the price goes crazy.
Well, it's funny actually. Some of these shows when they kick off and they have these massive fandoms and people rush out to grab everything as soon as it goes to market, and the prices jump up, and it's like you get this inflated market of items, and then obviously the price dumps down at the other end. I've seen some of the things that I collect, pop vinyls, that are valued at a certain amount, purchase them, and then a year later they're worth maybe 30% less, or even more. So sometimes I think it's good to be a little bit patient with some items, not buy into the hype. But if you can get in early and get something when it's at a regular price, then that's always really good when you do see something rocket up in price at the
Right.
same
It's like,
time.
boy, I'm glad I got that when I did.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. How many items? Like I'm looking at you, and I can see your collection in the background, and I've seen photos from the Instagram. But how many items do you reckon you'd roughly be up to?
Um, Honestly, I don't know. I've gotten really lax with my record keeping. I know that it's over 5,000.
Wow, jeez. Is this something where you're thinking about? You may have noticed, and actually, you did mention that you listened to the episode with Victoria, who is the Wizarding World, or was the Wizarding World Guinness World Record holder. Is this something you're thinking about doing? Maybe going for a record like that is something you've considered with an amount. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's funny you should
5,000
mention
pieces is
that,
huge.
because I was actually considering it, at least casually, until I listened to that podcast with Victoria and learned what could potentially be involved, and suddenly I became a little less interested in it.
It is like quite the process. It's a cool little title to have. I mean, also Robert, who's a Ghostbusters collector, he was actually inspired and helped by Victoria as well.
I listened to that one too.
Yeah, and he doesn't have 5,000 items, but he managed to get the record for the collection. I think if you were to probably put through that collection, if you were wanting to put the work in, you probably would hold that collection for a while, like that title, I think.
Probably. I mean, I know that I know most of the hardcore collectors. Now, the ones that I don't know about are the ones that keep a low profile and collect only props
Hmm.
or that sort of thing. But most of the hardcore Stranger Things collectors, I know them personally. So
Yeah, well, I'd imagine it is like as I said, it's a very popular show. It's only been around for a short amount of time, but I imagine that the amount of collectors who are, the full-on type collectors would be a small group. I did notice also on your Instagram something from pre-pandemic times in 2019, a thing called StrangerCon Nashville. Do you want to tell me a bit about that? Because I love conventions and I love these fan meetups. So, I'd love to hear more about something like this that, so early in the piece. What was that like? What was that experience like?
yeah, that Creation Entertainment has created cons specific for certain fandoms, and Stranger Things was one of them, and it's called Stranger Con. They have 5 or 6 of them a year at varying places in the country.
Hmm.
There are a couple of them that are kind of set in stone that are in the same place every year,
Hmm.
like New Jersey and Chicago, and then the other ones move around. The first one I went to was Stranger Con in Nashville in 2018. And then I went to a second one in Dallas in 2019.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit, and they were completely halted for a couple of years, and now they're started back up. But yeah, it is Stranger Things only. They generally have about 7 of the cast members
Okay.
that come to it, and they have a number of panels, and they do uh, autograph signings and photo ops, typical con type stuff. But it's all wrapped around Stranger Things.
So, how many people would you say attend these conventions? Like the Nashville one, for example. How many were there?
I believe there were about 2,000 people at the Nashville one. That was definitely one of the smaller ones. Dallas was considerably larger. I don't know how many. I think the biggest one is Chicago, and I think there can be upwards of 10,000 at that one.
Wow, that's a that's a huge amount of people. I mean, as we said, it is a quite a popular TV show, but that's really cool. So, is there anything in your collection that you picked up specifically at those conventions that's like a favorite item?
Um, Aside from like autographed photos and that sort of thing, or other memorabilia, now there's generally not too much in the way of vendors or buy sell trade going on at them. That's one of the weaknesses of those conventions. I
Mm.
think that the best thing for me is like the friends I've made at them. They've turned into, we've become sources for each other for finding things, obscure things, and
Well, that was going to be one of my next questions. How, like, within that group of people that you were talking about that you meet at the conventions or that you know as other collectors, do you tend to sort of buy and sell items from each other? Is there a lot of sort of exchange through that?
um sometimes there is, but it's more about people finding stuff for sale. I have people, if they find something for sale, particularly something obscure or something, a prop or something on eBay, I mean, I hear about it immediately.
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. And, and I do the same for them. Um, it's just, it's kind of a partnership, we all work for each other to try to, support, support our addictions.
Yeah, oh, well, and that's the cool thing about the collecting communities is having those people that you can share that passion with, and if they know that you're after a certain item and they can see it, they can let you know about that as well.
Yeah. And that's one of the most enjoyable things about the hobby for me, because I love, getting people enthused and getting them passionate about whatever their hobby is. Don't be ashamed to be passionate
Yeah,
and do your thing. If people roll their eyes at you, that's fine.
well, that's another reason why I have the podcast is to so that people can listen to other collectors and know that
Yeah,
there's different types of fandom out there. It doesn't matter what you collect. Just if you're a fan of something and passionate about it, just follow your heart. Just go with that. Be
exactly.
who you are.
Yeah, I've been accused of creating some addicts, but I'll take that that.
And so now that you've been collecting for a few years, you did mention that you were a collector from childhood. What types of things did you collect before you got into Stranger Things?
I have collected just about everything over the years. I mean, even as a young kid, I collected baseball cards, collected rocks, I collected beer cans, bugs. I went through a bug phase. In later years, there were books, antique tools. It's always been something.
Wow,
All
wow. I would think I think it's quite for a lot of collectors it's quite common that they maybe had some small collections that they started out with as a child that might be a little bit obscure. For me, I don't know how obscure it was, but I used to collect dinosaurs. Was probably one of the first things that I had collections of back when I was in primary school. I remember having a collection of like just plastic dinosaurs, toy dinosaurs that you'll get from a cheap toy store or something, and then I had dinosaur shaped rubbers and all sorts of things. And that was, I remember I just had one single shelf that had probably about 50 dinosaurs on it, and that was my very first collection from when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's the kind of and Hot Wheel cars. That was another one. That was one of my big ones as a kid.
Well, I still have some Hot Wheel cars, but mostly mine now are centered around Batman, different types of Batmobiles.
Yeah, I've seen that you're a Batman fan.
Yes, yes, it's definitely something that people know when they actually jump on a video call with me. And anyone who's looked at my Instagram would know 100% who my favorite character is. So we've spoken about the Stranger Con. We've spoken about the screen news props. When you're collecting, and when you have the type of collection that you have with 5,000 items, how do you go about space and actually setting that up? Do you have a method when you're setting up the display?
Um, right now, the displays are kind of in sad shape because quite frankly, I'm completely out of room, so I have to pick and choose what is going to be on display and in a box. I
Mhm.
recently expanded the collection down to the basement, put in a bunch of bookcases and things to be able to display down there as well. So that's given me a little bit of breathing space. Right now, I'm frantically trying to organize and get ready because I have a bunch of people coming in from out of town for Fan Expo Denver, which is Denver's version of Comic Con.
Oh, cool.
And people start arriving Wednesday night. So I am trying to get everything presentable by then.
Yeah, nice. And these are other Stranger Things fans as well.
Yeah, these are the friends that made along the way. Have a couple coming from England. I have a couple coming from Hawaii.
Oh, that's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, it's great. I mean, it really is all over the world.
Is there a specific collector that you've met at one of these conventions or online that sort of stands out? As someone who you were like, this is the most unlikely person that I might have never met had it not been for this fandom.
Yeah, Cinco, my new partner on my YouTube channel. We both knew of each other because he's got the biggest collection that I know of outside of me, but we had never met each other. And funny enough, we were at StrangerCon Nashville at the same time, and I recall seeing him. And because he's also a painter, so he paints these big oil paintings, and then he takes them to these cons to be autographed by the cast members. And I remember seeing him, but I didn't know him. And it was sometime later when I finally started talking to him online and realized, that we had these events in common. We had seen each other, we knew of each other's collections, but we had just never met.
Cool.
So he's become a good friend, and we've gotten together a couple of times. We went to Stranger Con in Dallas together, and then we also went to Atlanta together to tour some shooting locations last year.
Oh, tell me about that. Tell me about the shooting locations.
Yeah, so I have a couple of friends. They are really into the actual the cinematography and the film work and the locations and everything. And one of them has created what she calls her Bible, and it's basically every shooting location that they've ever used for Stranger Things.
Nice.
So we all got together in Dallas and we spent 3 days hitting all these shooting locations, the school and the lab and the video store and the arcade and all of these places and getting pictures and things like that. It was phenomenal. It was so cool to see that stuff in person.
What's the lab like in person? Is it much different to what you see on camera?
It's basically as ominous as it looks on the show. It's actually a facility of Emory University, and it's not in use for anything except for renting out to shoot movies. They've shot, I think, some episodes of Ozark there in addition to Stranger Things. They actually
Cool.
shot part of a movie there, and they were actively shooting when we were there, so we had to kind of be sneaky to be able to see anything because they had security all over the place. So
Yeah, I imagine they would have very tight security around those things. They don't want to have spoilers getting out. Especially in
exactly.
today's age where everyone's carrying a camera or a video camera on them.
Oh yeah, and there's constantly spoilers. You'll see pictures posted online, people with old telephoto lenses shooting at these locations, from some hidden area.
Yeah, trying to get a little glimpse of what's going on and what's coming up.
Yeah, so that was really great. And late this summer, I'm going down to Albuquerque to tour some of the shooting locations there that they used for season 4.
Oh, okay, cool. So I wasn't aware that they use like in these locations that are so far apart for the show as
The
well.
first couple of seasons, they pretty much stuck to their fictional town of Hawkins.
Mhm.
Uh, but in season three, they started spreading out. In season four, they're in Hawkins, which is done in Atlanta. They're in California, which is actually shot in New Mexico, and then they actually did shooting in Lithuania.
Oh yeah, of course, like to try and get some of the Russian
Uh,
scenes,
the
right?
yeah, the prison that Hopper's in
Yeah.
is set in Russia, so they shot all of that in Lithuania.
Yeah, excellent. I won't go into too many spoilers about what goes on in the show, but another thing I was thinking about actually before we started the interview, when I think about a show like Stranger Things, we're now in season 4, and I think about other TV shows that I'm a huge fan of and how long they've gone on for. How many seasons, like you personally, as a fan of watching the show, how many seasons do you think they might be able to go for?
They've already announced that season five will be the final season.
Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah, they there was some question actually before season four was announced whether season four might be the last one, but they when they sat down and mapped out their storyline, they realized that they couldn't complete their story in 4 seasons. So
Well, I mean, it's great for you as a fan. You get an extra season. Or great for all of us
it is,
as fans.
the wait in between the seasons is interminable, but it's always worth it.
Well, you mentioned like, I mean, we're what 4 seasons, and it's what 6 or so years that the show's been going for. So we've obviously had a long wait that happened during the pandemic, and I think it was it between season 2 and 3 that was where the longest wait was. I'm trying to remember, but where that
No,
huge
it was
wait was.
between season three and four. It was just about a month shy of 3 years.
Wow, I didn't even realize it had been that long
Yeah,
already.
they started shooting in Lithuania in early 2019, I believe. No,
Wow.
I guess it was 2020 because season three released in 2019. So in early 2020, they started it and they did some shooting over there, and then everything shut down, and
Yeah.
they didn't shoot again for like 8 months at all.
Wow.
So
But so cool that we'll actually get a fifth season. And just like talking about that with the length of the season, or the length of the series, it's really good to know that they have a plan for the story as well. You see some shows that just sort of seem to go on forever with season after season, and the story just becomes sort of monotonous or just doesn't play out the way you'd like it to end. I mean,
yeah,
you can't make everyone happy, as fans go.
I mean,
Um,
yeah, I would love to have it go on forever, but they had the 40,000 foot view of the story they wanted to tell before season one started,
yeah.
and they said there's a lot of twists and turns, and they didn't have any details plotted at all, so a lot of things change along the way. But yeah, the season five, they said that they will be able to finish the story.
There's also only so many years you can shoot those children, I think, before they become
Yeah,
adults, and then
these
it
kids.
becomes the same thing over and over again as well, right? Like kids see monsters, kids defeat monster. Next season, kids sees monster, kids defeat monster. Like,
And the fact that they were 11 or 12 playing 11 or 12-year-olds in season one.
yeah.
Now some of them are in college and they're playing 14, 15-year-olds.
That reminds me of the old days back in, and you may be able to identify with this, like 90210, like the old TV show from the 90s, and you
Oh
had like
yeah,
these 30-plus-year-olds that were playing teenagers in high
teenager.
school.
That's kind of an ongoing joke now with the kids. It's like gonna be the Stranger Things, the golden years.
Well, I tell you what, let's go in. You said you've listened to a few episodes, so you may be aware that occasionally I spring a little pop quiz on some of the guests as well. Or maybe you didn't listen to an episode with a pop quiz, but occasionally I like to put in a pop quiz. So I've got a few questions here, and I think you're going to do pretty well with these. I don't think I made it too hard, to be honest with you, but I've got 5 questions. Would you be up
Okay,
for a pop quiz?
absolutely.
All right, excellent. Well, okay, so for the trivia, 5 questions. First question, and you've already mentioned this one. I think this is probably the easiest question of all. What is the name of the town where the story is set?
Hawkins, Indiana.
Nice, nice, easy, easy. All right. Jim Hopper is quoted as saying to Flo, "Mornings are for what and what."
Coffee and contemplation.
I love that. I think that's one of the best quotes, to be honest, for the
I
show.
love it.
And I think as adults we can definitely identify with that. Like in the mornings, you just want your coffee, you want your quiet
Yeah, just
time, just get
leave me alone and let me get my caffeine, and then we'll be
yeah.
good.
Yeah, I love that. Jim Hopper is obviously, a really popular character because of the things like that as well. All right, so obviously nice and easy one so far. Well, I mean that was a pretty good one. That second question. Let's go number 3. At the start of season 2, the boys have Halloween costumes on. What is the movie that their costumes are from?
Ghostbusters.
And for a bonus point, can you tell me the release year Ghostbusters came out?
Oh gosh, 1988,
A little bit earlier.
6,
4. 84.
84.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you knew it was going to be 80s, but yes, 1984 was the release date for Ghostbusters. And while we're talking about the 80s, Sean Astin, who plays Bob, was a famous child actor from the 80s. Many people recognize him as Mikey in another group of young adventurers. In which film?
Goonies.
Yes, yes, and that's one of the things I love about Stranger Things is it really plays on that nostalgia from back in the
Because
'80s and those different films like Goonies, where you had these team up of the most unlikely sort of cast of characters as well.
yeah,
And
and I think that's part of the reason I love the series so much because I kind of came of age in the '80s, and that nostalgia factor really hit me hard,
yeah,
and they nailed it so accurately, especially coming from two guys who were just barely alive in the '80s.
yeah, it's a great show, and then exactly for the reasons you just said there. Last question. So you're perfect, perfect so far. Season 4, Chapter 1. Let me dial that back a second. So every season, every episode is called Chapter 1 through 8
Right.
or 9. Season 4, Chapter 1, what is the name of that episode?
Oh my God.
Is it a bit of a
Of
deep
course you
dive?
would do that one. The Hellfire Club. Yeah.
Yes, perfect, perfect, perfect. Yes, excellent. And the Hellfire Club, who is run by Eddie Munson, who's also become a beloved character now for fans.
He really has. I honestly I have to admit that I thought from all the previews and stuff that it was quite possible he was going to end up being a villain.
Mm.
But I love him. He is just awesome.
And played by the actor Joseph Quinn. A little extra fact for people, and you may be aware of this already, but he was also in Game of Thrones. He's actually a British actor, and he was also in Game of Thrones.
I did find that out recently. Yeah, I didn't even know he was British, and I had looked him up and I saw an interview with him. It's like another Brit. There's a lot of them on the show.
Yeah, well, we had Billy was also an Australian,
Yep.
so representing Aussies.
Charlie Sheen's British. Then of course Millie's British. Yeah, and there's Mayor Klein, Carrie Elways,
Yeah,
English.
yeah. Oh, and also another great face from the '80s as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Princess Bride.
Princess Bride. That was
Yes, yeah, I loved it.
such an '80s movie.
So, well, you've done well. You scored all 5. I won't ding you for the 1984. That was a bit of a left field question. I thought I might trip you up. I wasn't sure. But,
Yeah, I love Ghostbusters, but the years I've always been a little foggy on.
oh, it's a bit of a deep dive question. I don't think most people retain a lot of that. I mean, obviously, I know Batman '89, but that's like everyone knows that Batman '89
Yeah.
was '89. Like that's kind of how people refer to it. So, well, Diego, I've had a great time today. Before I let you go, as usual, give yourself a plug. Let people know where they can find you. I know you've got a YouTube channel and everything. So, where can people find more of you in your collection?
I am the Stranger Things collector on YouTube. That is my primary social media presence. I'm also on Instagram as the Stranger Things collector. I'm getting more active, but generally speaking, I'm not on Instagram a lot yet.
Mhm.
And then I also have my little Facebook group, which is called the Stranger Things Inn and Lounge, and it is specifically for collectors. It's a very small group. There's just a couple of hundred people. We're kind of we stay away from more of the popular type stuff,
Okay.
and right with collecting. So, but yeah, it's a great place, great people.
Cool. Well, I'll make sure to have the links to all these different things within the description on the episode as well, so people can check out those links. I think if you want to see even more and deeper dive into Diego's collection, you should definitely go check out the YouTube channel and his socials as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. So thank you again for being on the show, and I hope you have a wonderful time. Is it this weekend at the
Yeah,
Denver
this
convention?
coming weekend.
Yeah, excellent. Have a great time, and thank you for being on the show.
All right, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
If you liked the episode, please consider following or subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also join me on Instagram at Collecting Heroes, where you can see photos of the collections of the people that I'm talking to, as well as some of my own.